Okay, welcome in. I'm going to switch things up, go back to the NHL, and there were quite a few teams last year that were left without a captain, whether they just didn't have one last year, or someone may have possibly retired or didn't resign. I'm just going to make my predictions as to who should be the captain moving forward. Now, again, a lot of these teams they might just ride out this upcoming season with just alternate captains and make their decision in the new calendar year. But again, I'm just going to make my bold predictions as to who I believe should be the captains moving forward. So for the Anaheim Ducks, obviously they had Ryan Getzlaf be their captain for many, many seasons. He retired after the 2021-2022 season. So this past regular season, they just had alternate captains. So moving forward, there's three potential candidates I would give the captaincy if I were in charge of the Ducks. You're looking at a guy like maybe Troy Terry, who's obviously signed that long extension. He's one candidate. Trevor Zegras, if and when he's able to sign his contract, he'll be able. He should be in deserving of the captaincy as well. But honestly, if they can't get any of those two guys to agree on the captaincy, and honestly, who's going to turn down being a captain of a team? I'd give it to Cam Fowler. He's been with the team since the 2010-11 season, so he's had over a decade of experience with the Ducks. He would be my guy going forward, who would be deserving of the captaincy. The Arizona Coyotes haven't had a captain since the 2021 season when they traded Oliver Ekman-Larsson to the Canucks. So they've had 2 straight years where they've had no captain. The guy on your screen, Caden Keller, is signed for 5 more years with this upcoming season. Around the corner, I would give the captaincy to this guy here. I mean, he's young. He's your face of the franchise, more or less. And there's really no one else that really screams leader on the team or deserving of the team. Not trying to disrespect anybody on the team with any of my picks. But these are just my predictions of who I think should be the captains moving forward. For the Boston Bruins, Patrice Bergeron obviously has, now that he's retired, there's a big vacancy with that C, and there's three candidates, in my opinion, that would be or should be deserving of the C in the state of Massachusetts. So David Pastrnak, he's probably the leading candidate, in my opinion, to be your captain moving forward. The other one would be Brad Marchand. He's been with the team for quite a number of years. Obviously, he was part of that Stanley Cup team back in 2011. So he's had well over a decade in the city of Boston. And I would not be surprised if they decided to give the captaincy to him. And this might be an absolute long shot, but maybe also consider Charlie McAvoy, who signed for 7 more years with this upcoming season coming nearby. Again, he might be a complete long shot because the other two have had just as much experience, if not more experience, than McAvoy. But those would be my three candidates for the Bruins. So for the Buffalo Sabres, they already have Kyle Okposo, so I'm not going to bother looking up that team. The Calgary Flames, they're in quite a unique situation because they have a few different guys that I believe could be their captains, but they're all on expiring contracts. So if you look at Elias Lindholm, he's on his last year of his contract. If you can get this man signed long term, he would be my guy as your captain moving forward. But that's a big if you can get this man signed. There's been some speculation that maybe you give it to Jonathan Huberdeau. In my opinion, he hasn't proven to be a leader. Not trying to disrespect him in any way, but if it was up to me, I probably wouldn't give it to him. Yeah, going to be your highest paid player coming into this season, but just because you're the highest paid player doesn't mean you're going to be deserving of the captaincy. And there's two other candidates that I would consider, maybe Rasmus Anderson on the back end. He still has 3 more years left on his contract, so at least his contract isn't expiring. And then the other man that I would consider, who's been with the team since I think since the 2008 or 2009 campaign, he's been with the team for like 14 or 15 years, Michael Backlund. But again, just like Elias Lindholm, he's on an expiring contract as well. So you're not going to just give some guy the C and ride him out for 1 year, because if you do that, you guarantee what's going to happen is if Calgary's not in contention for a playoff spot, they're going to want to try to trade him rather than lose him in the offseason for absolutely nothing. So for the Carolina Panthers, they have Sebastian Aho, so you don't have to worry about trying to find a captain there. Chicago Blackhawks. Jonathan Toews is not coming back as a member of the Chicago Blackhawks, so therefore there's a vacancy with that C, and I'm going to make one of two predictions. I'm going to say that either they potentially give the captaincy to Seth Jones. He's still signed for 7 more seasons, but I got a funny feeling what's going to happen is because they have Connor Bedard, what they might do is have alternates going into this upcoming year, and wait until his sophomore season and make him as the captain, just like the Oilers did back in the 2016-17 season when they made McDavid their captain. So I would not be surprised if Connor Bedard, who's pretty much going to be the face of your franchise moving forward, if he got the captaincy in the upcoming season or seasons. The Colorado Avalanche, they do have their captain, but I just want to touch on this for just a brief little moment. So Gabriel Landeskog is their captain. He's still signed for 6 more seasons, but the problem with this is he missed the entire season last year. This upcoming season, he's scheduled to miss the entire year as well. The last time he played was when the Avalanche won the Cup back in 2022. So this is where I'm kind of at a crossroads with this. I'm not questioning his leadership. I'm not questioning his play. But if you're not able to play at all, does this mean you could potentially be put on the LTIR, which is becoming more common than not? And if that is the case, then my pick for your captain moving forward would have to be Nathan MacKinnon. He is the face of your franchise. He's obviously signed that extension, so he's going to be there for many, many seasons to come. Again, I'm not trying to disrespect Landeskog at all, but if you're not playing and you're hurt, something's got to give. That's just my opinion. So for the Columbus Blue Jackets, they have Boone Jenner, so he's signed there for many, many years, I believe, to come. The Dallas Stars, they do have Jamie Benn as their captain, so again, he's not going anywhere. The Detroit Red Wings, they have Dylan Larkin as their captain. Edmonton Oilers, they have Connor McDavid, like I mentioned just previously, and he's still signed for a few more seasons. The Florida Panthers, they do have Alexander Barkov signed for, I think, quite a few more years to come. The Los Angeles Kings, they do have Anze Kopitar as their captain. He's going to be there for at least 3 more years. The Minnesota Wild, they do have Jared Spurgeon. He is their captain moving forward. And for the Montreal Canadiens, you have Nick Suzuki. He's still signed for, I think, 7 more seasons. The Nashville Predators, they do have Roman Josi signed. So again, I'm not going to go through every single team. I'm just going through the teams that, like I said, should be looking into their captaincy going into the future. The New Jersey Devils, they do have Hischier as their captain. He's still going to be there for Nico Hischier, I do believe his name is. He's still going to be the captain for many years to come. The New York Islanders, they have Anders Lee as their captain. Once again, he's not going anywhere anytime soon. The New York Rangers, they do have Jacob Trouba as their captain. As long as he's signed for past this year, they're not going to give up the seat for his jersey. The Ottawa Senators, obviously they have Brady Tkachuk. He's their captain, and again, he's still signed for X amount of years. The Philadelphia Flyers, here we go. Finally getting back to who doesn't have a captain. At the end of the 2022 season, they did trade away, at the trade deadline, I should say, they did trade away Claude Giroux to the Panthers. So this past season that they just had, they had just went with alternate captains. My guess is that moving forward, if and when they do name a captain, I believe Sean Couturier is going to be the man going forward. He's signed for quite a long time, 7 more seasons, and he's been the alternate captain for many years prior, so I would not be surprised if moving forward they did name Sean Couturier the captain of your Philadelphia Flyers. The Pittsburgh Penguins, they still have Sidney Crosby as their captain. The San Jose Sharks, I shouldn't have clicked on them, I'm sorry. Obviously they have Logan Couture, so he's not going anywhere anytime soon, still signed for 5 more seasons. The Seattle Kraken, now this is an interesting squad. They did have a captain in their first season, which was the 2021-2022 campaign with Mark Giordano. But then by the trade deadline, he got traded away to Toronto. And last year, they just had alternate captains. So for the Kraken, no one really screams out as a leader or someone that is deserving of the C. But if I had to make a couple of different predictions or wild guesses, like this is just absolutely wild, you could look at maybe someone like Vince Dunn, who did sign an extension with the team. You could look at someone like maybe Jared McCann, who had a breakout season last year. Or you maybe look at someone like Yanni Gordy, who's a two-way forward. And then there's just, again, it could honestly be anybody at this point. After that, maybe you look at Matty Beniers, who just won the Calder. He's had, again, he could be your future guy. And then maybe, let's just throw this out there and look at maybe a guy like Jordan Everly. Yeah, he's on an expiring contract, but he's a veteran player, going to be 33 years old. If he isn't 33 already, like I said, with Seattle, they could go anyway. They could get a defenseman. They could get a forward. There's just a number of players, but again, there's no one that really screams out as, okay, this guy is well deserving of the C more than anybody. Maybe if Giordano didn't get traded, like I said, he'd still be the captain or would be deserving of being the captain. But like I said, no one really screams out as someone that is a deserving or should get the C. The St. Louis Blues. So this squad, obviously, they traded Ryan O'Reilly to the Leafs at the trade deadline, so they didn't have a captain after that. For the Blues, you could look at a number of players, but again, you have to also worry about the contracts as well. Maybe you could give this captaincy to Jordan Kyrou. You could look at maybe Robert Thomas as a candidate. In my opinion, I would give it to one of the 2 or 3 following. Braden Shen's been in the league for quite some time. He's been an alternate captain as well, so maybe he's someone you look at as a potential suitor as your next captain. This is just a absolute wild guess. Maybe you could consider Justin Falk as a next candidate. Maybe you consider Torrey Krug as a candidate. But my guess is maybe you also can really highly consider Colton Parayko. He has the longest tenured contract out of anybody, and he's stepped up his game quite a bit. So maybe look at him as another candidate as your captain moving forward. So Tampa Bay, obviously, you got Steven Stamkos. Toronto, you still have John Tavares. Vancouver, this is where it gets interesting. You have, I think, 2 or potential 3 suitors that could be or should be in deserving of it. The number 1 guy on my front runner would be Elias Pettersson. Obviously, they traded away Bo Horvat to the Islanders last year. So maybe Elias Pettersson is the guy moving forward as your captaincy. But then again, he's on an expiring contract as well. So you got to get him signed long term if you were to consider putting the C on his jersey. The other one, maybe you give it to Quinn Hughes. Doesn't necessarily have to be a forward. It could be a defenseman. It's more common than not to have a defenseman as your captain. So those 2 would be my 2 front runners. Now, an absolute long shot would be like JT Miller. He's coming off an extremely poor season after he finished with, I think, 99 points in the 2022 campaign. He kind of fell off the face of the earth this past season. So, again, this is an absolute wild shot. But if you don't get Pettersson or Hughes, maybe look at a guy like Miller. And if you don't consider him, then maybe look at a guy like Brock Besser. But again, the last 2 were absolute wild guesses. I don't think they're going to be captains, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. But like I said, I do believe it's probably going to come down to Elias Pettersson or potentially Quinn Hughes. So for the Vegas Golden Knights, they have Mark Stone as their captain. Washington, you still have Ovechkin. And Winnipeg. Now, this is where it gets interesting because last year, with the new coach intact, he actually stripped Blake Wheeler of his captaincy. And he didn't even have him as an alternate captain. So once I found that out, I'm like, okay, Wheeler is definitely on his way out. And then they bought out the last year of his contract. And now Wheeler's gone and signed with the New York Rangers. So there's maybe 3 guys that you could potentially consider as your future captains moving forward. The guy on your screen, I think, is like probably most likely going to be the number 1 candidate, Josh Morrissey. He's pretty much your quarterback on your power play. He's a fantastic defenseman. If you, for some reason, don't consider Morrissey as your captain, like I said, you have 2 other options. One more likely than the other. Maybe look at a guy like Kyle Connor, who's a breakout forward. He can score goals. He can set up goals as well. So maybe that's another guy you could potentially consider. Now this one there's 2 other possibilities. The first one is an absolute long shot just because he's on an expiring contract. Maybe look at a guy like Mark Scheifele, but there's been so many rumors that he wants out, and just like a lot of players do, if they're not comfortable or don't want to sign long-term with said team. But you got to think, he was the first pick in the new Winnipeg Jets franchise. So if you're able to sign this guy to a long-term, maybe you give him the contract. But again, if he wants out or you trade him away, then obviously there's no point in putting the C on his jersey. And then another possibility is Adam Lowry. He's going to be 30 years old if he isn't 30 by now, but I think he'd be a pretty strong candidate. He's a terrific 2-way forward. He can play on offense, and it's a pretty damn well on the penalty kill as well. So that would be my other consideration and as a nominee for your captaincy for your Winnipeg Jets. Thank you all for tuning in. This was quite a long video. If you happen to tune into the entire thing, I do thank you from the bottom of my heart. But like I said, these picks may come true. They may not. It's just who I think deserves to be the captains of the teams moving forward. As always, thank you very much for tuning in. And until next time, take care.